Right, many thanks, Ibrahim Hamidu, for that background report. And to begin our conversation, which borders on legislative agenda for the 10th House of Representatives, let me first introduce here in the studio my brother and friend, Hamzat Lawal, co-convener, Not Too Young to Run, and Chief Executive Officer of Connected Development. A pleasure to welcome you once again to Good Morning Nigeria.
Well, thank you for having me. Good morning, Nigerians.
All right, also joining us for the conversation from our Just studio in Plateau State, we have Dr. Abel Daniel Ochegbo. He's the former Deputy Clerk Administration in the House of Representatives, and now he's a creativity management consultant. Many thanks for joining us, sir. He's the former Deputy Clerk.
Thank you and good morning.
Former Deputy.
Let's begin from here in the studio. And Hamzat Lawal, I don't know if you've gone through the legislative agenda of the 10th Assembly. What do you make of it? And how is it in sync with the agenda of the executive, for this term? Because that has to happen.
I think it's ambitious, and I like that it's very clear, and I like that it's timely. And I think also it's commendable because we've never seen this level of relationship and coordination between the legislative arm and the executive arm. Yeah. Even if, yes, we know that the legislative arm, one of their key functions is to oversight the executive in holding them to account. But I think as much as they hold them to account, they're also an arm of government. And as government, particularly federal government, they must work in sync. And I see the agenda in line with President Tinubu's aspiration for the Nigerian people. And for me, I'm particularly keen on the constitutional amendment process because this would now inform even how 2027 elections would be undertaken, but also women participation in politics and governance, because there's this exciting bill around reserved seat for women. Interestingly, it is sponsored by the Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives. And knowing that the Deputy Speaker is the chair of the Constitutional Amendment Committee, so for us, we believe that this bill will see the light of the day and Mr. President would sign it into law, and women would now get that integration in our national development. Because, if you look at the population of Nigeria, over 50% are women. And today they don't have a seat on the table when you talk about legislative agenda. Because when you look at data, in the Senate, we have less than 4%. In the House of Representatives, it's less than 7%. This is not good when you look at representation across board. And I believe that if we run an inclusive society, Nigeria will be better for it.
But just to say, because when you say, well, the Deputy Speaker is the chairman of the Constitutional Amendment Committee, only recently, I think last week, the House shut down his bill, which was talking about rotational presidency. And in fact, he presided to make it double, you know. So is it always a guarantee that you could get these things done? I know how difficult that particular, when you talk about the gender bills, as they call them, regardless of the advocacy, regardless of the campaign, it didn't fly still.
So if you look at the rotational bill, it was the first reading and it was shut down because there was no consensus, there was no general acceptability. And of course, again, they say it has been stepped down, but they would go and look at it critically and probably reintroduce it into the House. But the interesting part about legislation, particularly in open forum and debate, is yes, the minority will have their say, but the majority will have their way. The exciting part is everybody will have a say, and whatever takes precedence is the one who has a stronger argument and who has been able to mobilize people to support their own argument. And that's the beauty of democracy. Without the National Assembly, this would not be a democracy. So again, if you look at particularly the reserved seat for women, it has garnered support across board, from the grassroots to the political elite, to women in political forum, to civil society, young people. Unlike other bills, this one is clear, and this does not threaten anybody's seat. You know, this just allows for women to compete among themselves. You know, so nobody would lose their seat. Just that there are more seats now that will be introduced at the State Assembly and at the National Assembly that would allow for women to run. You know, some political party at the last election during the primaries gave free ticket to women. Some say, 50% discount, just to ensure integration of women into politics. We believe that if we get this bill, then constitutionally we would create more room for women, and you know, future generation will not only understand leadership as just men. We want to see faces of women. You see Madam Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, Madam Amina J. Mohammed. These are people doing very fantastic internationally. But we want to see more women within our politics nationally to inform national development, to contribute their own quota in our very young and what I call emerging democracy, you know. So I'm optimistic that this bill will see the light of the day, unlike previous bill. And we've learned lessons. You know, we've learned lessons from, you know, all the other gender bills. And part of these lessons are shaping what campaigns and our messaging, and also reaching out to various stakeholders across board. But mind you, our Not Too Young to Run bill that is now law was not a walk in the park. It took over 11 years. And when we got it passed in 2019, it took over 2.5 years consistent campaign at the National Assembly. We got over 32 state assemblies, so even more than 2/3 majority, because we just need 24, but we got over 32. And then we gave the president, for the very first time, an ultimatum, and finally he signed. After jokingly even saying when he signed that we should wait to 2023. But we've seen, you know, youth inclusion now. For the first time, we have a minister of youth that is young. Before now, you get an older person. And now there's that change in narrative. Because before now, when you talk about youth, you see 50, 60-year-old men saying they're youth. But now there's a change in narrative, you know. And we hope that, you know, we will continue to deepen it. But we want to see more women, you know.
Right. Many thanks, Hamzat. Of course, you know, that bill excites every woman, and I'm particularly excited about it. And let's get to Jos now, where we have Dr. Ochigbo joining us. I'd like to find out from you what you think about, you know, the legislative agenda, you know, by the House of Reps. I'm sure you've seen it. So speak to us about it. Key highlights for you.
Thank you so much. Yes, having looked at the legislative agenda of the 10th House of Representatives, if I will be impressed, as far as that document is concerned, it's a very loaded document, well brought out, well thought of, well crafted. I got interested trying to look at the trajectory that led us here. And permit me to just mention a bit. This effort started in the 9th Assembly. And to the extent that the 10th Assembly has followed in tandem with steps laid, I think it's something to commend the 10th Assembly for. One of the ills of this country is leadership vacuum, and the fact that we don't most times see leadership as a continuum. So to that extent, I think it's something commendable. Yes, when you look at the thematic areas between the 9th and the 10th Assembly, I think one we had like a 10-point thematic area document, and we have, I think, 8 now. But you will see that virtually they are the same things tweaked here and there. So I think that is commendable. But again, let me also look at what the Speaker said. If you have read his comments and his remarks during inauguration of this very, the policy dialogue. And he said a number of things that are very catching. One, he made the point that this is all about parliamentary accountability. It's about inclusivity. It's about transparency. and the quest to deliver a truly people-driven legislature. He also mentioned the fact that these are extraordinary times that require extraordinary response. Now, like I said, when you look back, when the Ninth Assembly was commissioning that same document, the then Speaker said one or two things that I like to refer to, just to point out this continuum that I mentioned. He did say that they were, assuming office at times of very swift, rapid, and inexorable changes. And to that extent that Nigerians were not too patient with them because they wanted to see, fast and urgent action across all areas. In fact, they didn't have the luxury of time, perhaps because of coronavirus at that time, and so on, which I remember he mentioned that scourge, the coronavirus, exposed a number of weaknesses within the system. And I still remember he said that if they were not careful, that they would be the ones to superintend over what he called the requiem mass, or what I describe as the requiem mass of system collapse. Now, coming back to what the current speaker in the 10th Assembly and his deputy said, if you read it during the inaugural, ceremony, there are a number of comments there that are very telling. But let me emphasize this. The speaker said something. He said, and I saw it, he was using the letter C in 3 places. He said they were going to celebrate their wins. They were going to confront their shortcomings. They were going to be committed to doing better programming. Now, I looked at all that fine document, well-crafted, beginning from the 9th Assembly to where we are, good, everywhere we can score you well. However, the challenge is this. And that is where the quest for urgent national development comes in. And I always try to emphasize. We must be careful. Yes, are we giants? But let us be that we are not lay-footed giants. Yeah, we've talked so much about potentials. That's good. But let us emphasize the in potentials. Are we talking of synergy? We've talked about synergy, and that is very fine. We need to work to, enhance stability and then bequeath a very, very stable governance structure. However, be sure that in that synergy there is energy. Otherwise, like someone said, if 2 of you are the same, then 1 is unnecessary. So these are challenges that we must really, really guide and be sure that we are on the road to performance. Otherwise, the gains that we are seeing may just wither away. And let me say this. The speaker mentioned in his inaugural speech that they were open to criticisms and that it was not just a gathering that they will come, but that they want to have feedback. So like I've said, yes, very fine document, and come to think of it, the legislature is about the most cerebral of the 3 arms of government. The legislature is about perhaps the most visible, the ones that the citizenry wants to see accountable at all times. And no wonder there is so much talk about this parliamentary accountability, which the document is at the behest of. Now, given all that, and then when you come to juxtapose this against the core, mission and vision and the values of the legislature or the House of Representatives, you discover that yes, this legislative agenda actually remains a very comprehensive guide towards performing their activities of lawmaking of oversight and representation. So, having said all that, I think what the legislators should do, very fine document, very fine program, very excellent project, but we must guide against non-performance. The Deputy Speaker, let me say this as my last point here. Deputy Speaker said it that there is a trajectory going on and that we are in a paradigm shift where we are moving from what he talked about, moving from challenges to solutions. We are moving from just potentials to performance, and then to being a truly people-driven legislature. So our challenge, the challenge of the legislature, the challenge of the House of Representatives will be to stay within that bracket, to stay within that fine mix. Thank you. The House of Representatives will be to stay within that bracket.
Dr. Ebel Ochigbo, but I would like to stay with you. Given your insider knowledge, how significantly would you say that the 10th House has deviated or improved upon, previous legislative agendas of the House of Representatives?
Well, I'm very careful here to make a final assessment because, like I always want to say, let us get the end of a matter is better than its beginning. But all the same, like I said, I've spotted a very fine trajectory that, you see, when you find a house that is off the mark, you can immediately see. But given where we are, this legislative agenda is like a midterm assessment. And when you look at that, for the current leadership, or for the current House of Representatives, the 10th House of Representatives, to within about 2 years have a record of over 1,000 bills, I think that is something to really give them kudos for. When you look at the number of legislations and you want to see the marks they have made in a number of places, look at the regional focus to development, the development commissions that have been passed, and there are a number of record bills like that that have been passed. And to that extent, we'll say that they are not off the mark. They are doing very well. But then, don't forget, like I always say, even when you score an A is generally about 70 points. You still lose 30 points. So I think I'll score them very well. But in terms of absolute comparison, I think let's just leave that within a qualitative description of the fact that, yes, they are within very good scores, within good bracket. And at best, I would say that they are doing fine. And if they go the way they are going, at the end of the day, we may likely witness an improvement over past legislatures. Thank you.
Your comments there. Let's get back right here in the studio and speak with Hamzat. Listening to both of you, you seem to think that the House of Reps is well positioned, to do the needful. But you also pointed out, which Dr. Ochigbo also mentioned, that there's a synergy between the legislature and the executive. And my question is, does that promote good governance? If the legislature seems to be in sync with the executive, how do we check the exercise of the executive? How do we, promote good governance? How do we check corruption? How do we, just to ensure that, there's development for the people, not just synergy between these two arms of government?
First, the reason why they're all at the House of Representatives and even the executive being in office is to ensure that the Nigerian people enjoy the dividends of democracy. So there should not be apart in terms of how they hope to deliver these dividends of democracy. I think it's the benefit of the citizens if they're in sync. And this does not take away their constitutional role. particularly around legislative oversight and ensuring that, they hold the executive to account. Being in sync would, I believe it would not take that out. We've seen in previous governments an experience where, because of loggerheads, the Nigerian people were the ones that suffered. Particularly during the saga between the 8th National Assembly and the then President Muhammadu Buhari, just because of that disagreement between both, both government arms, particularly around ideology, how we access foreign loans, and, general debate around how the country should be governed. And the Nigerian people suffered. We deeply suffered for it.
But do the Nigerian people do the Nigerian people also suffer when the legislature is just a rubber stamp of the executive?
So, but we've seen that this is not a rubber stamp relationship, because I've had the opportunity of attending a few debates, a few public hearings, and even during committee sittings where they bring executive to either defend their budget or even provide information about how they've utilized their budget. I've also jointly done oversight function, working with some legislators, particularly around how the zonal intervention have been implemented. That's the constituency project. And for us, we even helped the legislative arm to build a tool that is called NOMTRAC. And what we try to do is, how do legislators even nominate this, nominate projects into the budget? Taking feedback, taking data from communities in terms of what are their needs, and how this inform what makes it to the budget. And when the budget is signed by the president, after being passed by the board arm of the National Assembly, and then also tracking implementation after funds are being disbursed, either from the Accountant General or the Ministry of Finance. So we've seen, that synergy between civil society and the legislative arm. And, this National Assembly, to be fair to them, as much as there's that synergy, they always put their feet down in terms of getting more knowledge and information from the executive arm and holding them to account. And I particularly like their style. There's no need to make everyone feel tensed in the room. There's that cordial relationship, there's that synergy. But most importantly, everyone understands their constitutional role and mandate, and they're doing it seamlessly.
If you said there's no tension and there's calm, I would like you to, speak around how this, 10th National Assembly has dealt with the most critical issue in the country at the moment, which is security. All right? And looking at this legislative agenda, what are your thoughts, really? Do you think we're going to see an improvement, or it's just going to be, I don't know. Speak to us really about that.
We're already seeing improvements. If you look at recent reports and the intelligence, some of these people who have perpetrated some of these social vices have been apprehended, they've been arrested. Yes, we've lost good men from the security forces, but they are not deterred. I also know that for the very first time under this assembly, there've been open dialogue between the service chiefs and the legislators. Mind you, in previous time, the legislative arm would invite service chiefs and they would not honor it. They would not come, they would not send representative, and they would not even apologize. But there have been series of engagements where service chiefs, because I witnessed one of those engagements, at the National Assembly. And it was agreed that periodically the service chief would come and brief, the joint sitting of the National Assembly on what they've done. And we've also seen that this has also helped in terms of how much resources is being budgeted for security, and how these resources, for the very first time, in a transparent manner, how they're using these resources to ensure that Nigerians really feel safe and secure. So we've seen some progress, and I think, it's kudos, yes, to the 10th House of Representatives, but also, how the National Security Advisor is coordinating efforts, working with security chief, and ensuring that there is periodic information and knowledge sharing. Because, before now, there's that, some agencies want to take the shine, but now you see all of them are in sync, they're talking to each other, they're working in synergy, and no one is taking particular credit. For them, they just want to ensure that they deliver on President Tinubu's mandate and directive that he has clearly given to them. So we want to see more of this. We want to see that more synergy between both arms of government, that's executive and legislative, but how they're also working with security. Because again, you see, when you have a legislative arm that engage with security forces or leaders of security forces, what this also does is it gives morale to the men on the ground that our principals are engaging with our legislators who are representative of various constituents, and some constituents are also affected. So it gives that level of comfort and confidence to the people, but also the armed forces on the front line.
So would you then say, from where you stand, that this current House of Representatives is open to citizen-driven legislative processes, or are we just ticking boxes?
No, we're not just ticking boxes. They're very open to engaging, and they're open to citizens' engagement. So I'll give you another example. I know that they have a fellowship, for instance, at the House of Rep. And this was started by the previous speaker, that's Right Honorable Bajabiamila. And where they recruit young people. They train them, equip them with tools, and make them understand the legislative process, and also assign them to various committees within the National Assembly, particularly in the House of Rep. And I know that even this 10th Assembly have continued in that fold, equipping young people, engaging them in this process. Because when I go to House of Rep, for instance, I see familiar faces, I see young faces, who you can relate with and who you can engage and ask critical questions, and can even give you information and knowledge and direct you to where you can get more resources. So this is a legislative arm that really want to engage, and that are engaging. I know there's a couple of public hearings that have happened. Now that they're resuming, and with this legislative agenda, I know from early next month, there will be more public hearings. And they give ample time. They're patient to also listen to various opinions and various perspectives, even from civil society and from citizens. They've been open dialogue and engagement. In short, for the first time, my organization signed a memorandum of understanding with a sitting House of Rep. Unlike before, when you go to the National Assembly and you see them, their office are empty or they're not on their seat. This one, if they're not on the floor of the House, they're in their office, or they're in their constituent, engaging their various constituents. And we'll follow them from the National Assembly to the ground on how they're undertaking various empowerment programs, how they're also providing legislative feedback, organizing town hall meetings, which some were even supporting. So I've seen that synergy, and there's that cooperation amongst themselves, particularly in the House of Rep. How the principal officers and their leadership carry themselves, with pride, and how they've even engaged opposition views and voice in the House of Representatives. And I must commend them.
Of course.
They've taken lessons from previous houses, and they're doing better.
Of course, there's a bit of calm in the House of Reps, compared to the Senate. But, let's hear from Dr. Chigbo now, listening to Hamza talk about, how the 10th House of Reps is doing in terms of security. The next question on my mind is how all of this will impact on the economy. That's another critical aspect every Nigerian, is looking at the legislative agenda and looking at how far they have come, this past 2 years down the line. What are your thoughts, really, going forward?
Okay, thank you. Let me emphasize the fact that leadership in all realms, particularly at the level of the legislature, it's about performance, it's about impact, it's about tangibility, it's about sustainability. Yeah, we can go through all the cliches. You can go through all the very fine documents, such as the one we're looking at this morning. But the question on the lips of Nigerians is, how does this impact on what I am going through? Yeah, the challenges are always there, and that is why there's a government. So the point is that we must wake up very urgently. Particularly, let's take the issue of security. Yes? I've seen so many government functionaries giving explanations and trying to explain why it's become a very difficult phenomenon and all that. But the point remains, like I've said, that continuous engagement, feedback, constructive criticisms will all be part of what will change the scenario. Now, today we are witnessing a leadership regime, not just in our nation, but across the world, that leaders are becoming highly, disoriented when it comes to criticisms. And in our society, we have so much of that. We are very, let me put it, chronically contemptuous about criticism. But leaders must listen to the people. I mean, everywhere today, the issue of security, 10 years down the line, and you keep wondering whether are we really getting it. Scores and scores of debates and, brainstorming and seminars and conferences and so on are going on. But is the average Nigerian, when are we going to say that insurgency will become a thing of the past? When are we really going to say that you can sleep with your two eyes closed? And it's not an easy thing, but then that is the challenge of leadership. Fortunately, there's nothing we can do except that we must keep going on to make sure that we knock out this scourge. Again, I remember when the Ninth Assembly was going through their legislative agenda. I remember the Speaker still said this. He said that the challenge is a constant reimaging of the structures and the assumptions that underline the, whatever we are calling legislative agenda. And this constant reimaging is where we still are. Whether in security, whether in any other area of governance, is a constant thing, assessment, and that we have to do. I give you, let me paint this picture. And that is very, very topical for the average legislator in our polity. Today, when you see the average Nigerian sees a civil servant, a public servant, what does he think? When you see a doctor, what comes to your mind? Medical doctor. When you see a policeman, what comes to your mind? When you see a customs officer, what comes to your mind? And so the same way, when you see an average legislator today, what does the average Nigerian think? Perhaps I don't have the answers, but that is the challenge that is before us. As we look at the legislative agenda of the 10th Assembly, and I think if you look at what the Speaker said, you will see that it's like everything is just there. What we are waiting for is to see the impact. And like I've said earlier on, we are doing synergy, beautiful. But synergy, the one that must have energy, the one that impacts on the average Nigerian. Otherwise, like I said, we'll just become the same, and then we'll make nonsense of the principles of separation of power and all that, and then democracy becomes like worthless. Two of you are the same, and one is unnecessary. So that is the real challenge before us. Two of you are the same, and one is unnecessary.
Thank you very much for your thoughts. I'd just like to stay with you for a moment. Now, one priority of this legislative agenda is promoting transparency and openness. So how effectively do you think the current House is achieving this internally, especially when it comes to committee activities and then budget oversight?
Okay, thank you. Let me say this. Sometimes I just think that the legislature is between the devil and the deep blue sea when it comes to defending itself as an institution, when it comes to protecting its own image and delivering the dividends of democracy to the average Nigerian. Yes, In the course of my service in the National Assembly, at some point I was the clerk to the Committee on Ethics and Privileges. And I know situations where the House tried to discipline its own members. The House had to rise to try to, watch public opinion and then respond to it. So it's really a big challenge. Sometimes we watch when issues get out of the National Assembly into the public space, and we begin to judge and gauge the efforts and then the activities that surround them. But let me quickly say, when I looked at the current document, the legislative agenda, against what we had in the 9th Assembly, I think somewhere I saw, I hope I'm correct, in the 9th Assembly you see almost at the beginning, almost the first thing you see, reform the House of Representatives. Reform the House of Representatives. Now, it's still there somehow, but like I said earlier on, perhaps it's tweaked under some other heading, whether social reform or something like that. So, and under that comes the urge and the demand for the House to be transparent. And in the document that we have before us right now, the legislative agenda, if you go through it, you see so much talk about transparency. Like I said, the Speaker in his opening remarks at the dialogue, he talked about the fact of transparency, and it was there. Parliamentary accountability, transparency, inclusivity, and all that. So what is left for us is to see the structures that will be put in place to deliver on this transparency. And perhaps let's give them the benefit of doubt for now, because I've also looked at the implementation strategy for this legislative agenda. And if you look at what is there, if you look at that document, you'll be impressed based on what we have, because you're going to look at every activity against whether it's a short-term activity or in the short term, in the mid-term, in the long term, and then the responsible party to execute. So that means that, and then you see it there, between 2025 that we are in, right up to 2027, they are all well laid out steps that we are going to see who is responsible, how are we going to do this. So as far as that transparency is concerned, yes, the commitment of the leadership based on all that they have said, yeah, we take that, and we are grateful for that. Now it is left for us to juxtapose what you are saying against the implementation strategy which you have so mapped out and which you have outlined in that document. And that is when we are going to hold you responsible. The Deputy Speaker, when he made his own speech, talked about enhanced visibility of the legislative agenda by the end of this year. So, well, we are going to see it, and that is where this issue of transparency comes. For now, the fact that you've openly mounted it shows that you are committed to it, and let's give them that. But at the end of the day, we are going to watch how have you come from here to there. Thank you.
Many thanks, Dr. Ochigbo. We'll return to the studio and, of course, get to Hamzat. I'm being told that we have just a few minutes left for this conversation. But I'd like you to speak about, implementation, really. A lot of people get to say that we're not in short supply of laws. The House of Reps, the Senate, they keep coming up with bills which eventually will be signed and all of that. But we don't get to see all of this. Some really, come to fruition, to reality that, would lead to a change. What would be your advice, really, going forward, just so that we do not continue to churn out bills that will be signed and all and everything, and yet things are not changing? What would be your recommendation, really, to the House of Reps?
I think first is to continue to undertake needs assessment, continue to review and collect feedback, and informing decisions and implementation based on data. What are the aspiration and will of the Nigerian people. What are they saying? How what you're doing is directly impacting them and indirectly impacting them. How can you change as you're implementing, using data, using feedback, and continue to engage a spectrum of stakeholders, from civil society to private sector to the media, to the executive and even the judicial arm. How, are you, living your comforts and also going to your various constituents and sharing information, sharing knowledge even amongst yourselves as legislators? How are you taking, short-term reviews, long-term reviews, just to inform how you implement the strategy and the current plan by the 10th Assembly, particularly the House of Reps. So I believe if we inform our decisions based on data, and we have a lot of data, and one key point of reference is how they work closely with the National Bureau of Statistics, who is an agency of government that is saddled with the responsibility of collecting data, and chunking out this data. How can they work with them and even refine how the methodology, how they can work with them to review methodology that, impacts legislative engagement, impacts how they implement their legislative agenda, and how the Nigerian people are perceiving, its effects on everyday life.
Interesting. And if we have to, looking forward, what do you think that this House should do to bring about improved dividends of democracy for the people? And when I say this, I speak from the perspective of the work that they have to do, whether it's in terms of oversight, in terms of committee engagements, in terms of direct engagements with the people. I mean, there are several committees that deal with the people, whether you are talking about public petitions, for instance. What else needs to be done to make it better?
I think that if they continue on this trajectory and continue to have that continuous engagement and dialogue with different spectrum of society itself, but also investing a lot, because I like the fact that the Deputy Speaker talked about, popularizing and sharing knowledge around their agenda. You see, a lot of Nigerians don't even know the role of the legislative arm. And that's why you see legislators, when they go for their campaign, they promise what they cannot give. And this has really raised the bar high in terms of how, because the legislator has no business in what the executive arm should implement. So I believe if we can sensitize and conscientize the Nigerian people so they understand the role of legislative arm and hold them to account to it. I like how they talked about accountability and transparency. But if people don't know, they can ask and they can hold you to account. And maybe making their legislative agenda more popular, working with the media, so that the Nigerian people sort of have a sense of their roles and responsibility and continue to undertake oversight functions.
Well, what do you think are the major challenges facing the 10th House of Reps?
I think that we cannot even isolate them from society, because the two major challenges, what we're facing even as a country, economic issues, and how they are going to pass laws to ensure that households can access credit, of access to finance, job creation. There's a lot of young people who want to get engaged. How do we create jobs, create value in working with the private sector? How do we scale on our work or our achievement on insecurity? Because these are three critical issues that if we can tackle heads on, then the Nigerian people can beat their chest and say, yes, we're now enjoying the dividends of democracy across board.
Now, corruption and opacity, have often plagued the National Assembly spending. In your opinion, the recent transparency initiatives by the House come across as genuine or mere optics?
Well, we started this joint campaign with EIE budget and Follow the Money at that time around openness. And Nigeria is now a signatory to the Open Government Partnership that allows for greater transparency and accountability, particularly fiscal accountability. I think that the House of Rep can do better in sharing and making their budget more open, but also giving maybe quarterly breakdown on their income and expenditure, and how this is impacting legislative function, and how this is also addressing issues that critically affect various constituents. I believe it's possible, but they can do better in making their budgets more open, more easily accessible, and also give feedback in terms of expenditure and the impact of those expenditures, not to them, but to the Nigerian people. Because, you know, there's a big debate around what is the take-home of an average.
Who oversights
Yes.
the National Assembly too?
Yeah, and yeah. So again, it's for them to become more open. And I like the other speaker that said, don't take feedback or criticism as an attack. You know, it's engagement. You know, have an open mind and use it to inform how you continue to engage the public.
What would you want the House of Reps to do with the civil society? That's your space.
Yes.
Do you think they're engaging them enough? You know, what would you want them to do differently with the civil society, just so we can have a better nation?
Yeah, there can never be enough engagement. I know that, for instance, Other Paper and Plaque, whose role is targeted and focused, and even CISLAC on the legislative arm. I think there can be more engagement, because this engagement would also help them to see us as partners, and then we can create more awareness about their functions and their role. But for me, I think the opportunity lies in oversight, legislative oversight, how they can work with civil society to do joint. You know, in the past, we've worked with media, civil society, and legislators to go for oversight function. And we've seen greater accountability and also citizens enjoying and benefiting from the dividends of democracy. Because when you undertake this oversight jointly, what it does is the media can amplify it, civil society can hold the executive to account, and then the legislative arm will not be overburdened or burnt out from, you know, that continuous engagement. Because mind you, they have committee, they have to go to plenary, they have to travel to different locations for their oversight function. So I think that we can have more of that engagement, and maybe even agree to use one single tool, like the norm track tool, where it helps in nomination but also helps in tracking, and the database is centralized so citizens can see knowledge and information firsthand. Today we'll talk about technology and artificial intelligence, so let's embrace it, let's use it, and particularly how they vote. You see, a lot of time when they vote, either yea or nay, a lot of time people don't know where they stand. You know, in other climes, you see how many legislators vote for yes or no. And this would also inform how their constituents are knowing that, oh, they're actually representing our interests, not their own personal or selfish interests. So again, that would really help to ensure they're actually transparent, like they've put it in their legislative agenda. Let's see what they're voting for.
Right.
Let's have single vote, not the general yeah or nay.
As we gradually wind down this conversation, let me get to Dr. Chibo one more time. And we are still talking about, you know, citizen engagement. And I'd like to ask, you know, what more the legislature can do, you know, to make public hearings and oversight inquiries more accessible and impactful to ordinary Nigerians.
Thank you. Well, the challenge to the leadership of the National Assembly, aka the House of Representatives, is to be open to do more, not to rest on their oars. Virtually everything we're talking about here this morning, if you go, you'll find them all tucked in here and there. They are not issues, most of them are not issues that are new. It's just that the commitment to them that should be new. And let me also say this very quickly, and I think at some point in the past I had mentioned this, that even the citizens, you know, when we talk about citizens' engagement, that's all right. But it's sad to say that many of our citizens don't even understand. In fact, they seek to redefine the role of an average legislator. They come to Abuja, want them to be super, want them to be excellent in the sciences of lawmaking. But then you get back home, your constituents tell you that's not what we're interested in. It may not be everywhere, but this is a very, very sad issue that most times lawmakers have to contend with. If some of them will be sincere and to talk with you, they will tell you what it looks like there. And they tell you you can go speak all your grammar and go around. When you come to the National Assembly, it's is a flurry of activities, particularly in the House of Reps where you have over 130 committees and so on. So the penchant and the tendency to be distracted is there. But they must be committed to ensure that these are the things you must do. And let me say this. The issue of engagement, the issue of, I think at the inauguration I had something about collaborative problem sharing, robust debates and so on. Yeah, that's okay, very fine. But then, if we want to improve citizens' engagement and all that, we must, and I repeat, we must win ourselves of this praise-singing culture. Today, the average leader in our country, you don't praise him or her, you are in trouble. And we must get out of that. I'm interested in commencing a project or a research. Do Nigerian leaders, or leaders, wherever for that matter, do better while being celebrated or praised, or when they are criticized, albeit constructively? And sometimes it appears to me that because of the years of military jackboot governance that we had, maybe we became very, very autocratic, authoritarian in our approaches, such that, like I said at the beginning, we become highly intolerant and chronically contemptuous of criticism. But we must be open. What do the citizens want? What are they advising? What are they counseling us to do? And then we'll come and refine this, particularly through the implementation strategies that we are going to be looking at the end of the year. Don't forget, 2027 is around the corner already. You just have about 5 months that year. So whatever we are doing is mainly between now and next year. So let this document not just become a sing-song as such. And what you have just mentioned, citizens' engagement, is all part of it, that we must take time to ensure that all these bits and pieces that between myself this morning and my colleague at the other end have talked about, they are all issues that must come into the bowl to ensure that our quest for good governance, our quest for national development, our quest for an egalitarian society are not frittered away.
Many thanks, Dr. Abel Daniel Ochigbo, for your comments. It was a delight to have you. Thank you so much. Former Deputy Clerk Administration in the House of Reps, and now a creativity management consultant. Many thanks for being our guest. We appreciate you. And of course, right here in the studio, the co-convener, Not Too Young to Run Movement, Chief Executive, also the Chief Executive, Connected Development, has Hamzat Lawal. Many thanks once again for your insights, and thank you for being our guest this morning.
Thank you for having me.
We appreciate you. All right, so we'll take a break now. When we come back, we get into the second conversation, which is on education. It's on the school's achievements. You want to see this? Stay with us.